Paris, the city of lights, where grand boulevards and cozy cafes usually bring to mind romance and freedom. But on certain days, in the heart of the city, the familiar sounds of accordion music and cheerful chatter are drowned out by loud chants. Traoré, step down now! Not from the French, but from the sons and daughters of Burkina Faso, a distant nation in West Africa, raising their voices. They left their homeland in search of a new life, but their hearts still turned toward Ouagadougou. And now they march through the streets of Paris, carrying flags, banners, and deep disappointment toward a young leader once seen as a symbol of hope. While inside Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré is still praised by many as a hero resisting foreign powers. In Paris, the diaspora community sees him as a leader who must resign. Today's story is not only about a protest. It is about lives lived in exile, about the division in how one leader is perceived, and above all, about the power of a diaspora community when it raises its voice for the future of its homeland. To understand why the Burkinabè community in France took to the streets, we need to look back at the reality of their homeland. Burkina Faso is a small, landlocked country in West Africa, with a population of over 20 million. Its name means the land of upright people. But in truth, life there has long been filled with hardship. For more than a decade, the country has faced relentless terrorism and armed violence. Groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State have repeatedly attacked villages, leaving thousands dead and forcing millions to flee their homes. The economy is exhausted. Most people depend on farming, but drought and conflict have made food scarce. Steady jobs have become a distant dream for many young people. Politically, the nation is unstable. In less than 3 years, Burkina Faso has gone through 2 coups, and since Ibrahim Traoré seized power in 2022, there has been no clear roadmap back to democracy. All of this has pushed hundreds of thousands of people to leave their homeland, searching for safer places with more opportunities. And France, as the former colonial power, became the natural destination for many Burkinabè. But leaving doesn't mean forgetting. They carry with them memories, pain, and the hope that one day Burkina Faso might change. When Ibrahim Traoré appeared on Burkina Faso's political stage in 2022, he was only in his early 30s, far younger than most other African leaders. His youth, his image as a stern military officer, and his fiery speeches made many people, both inside and outside the country, place high hopes in him. For many Burkinabè, Traoré was seen as the heir to the spirit of Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary leader often called the Che Guevara of Africa. He promised to protect national sovereignty, resist Western influence, and bring a brighter future to the nation. But in just a few short years, those hopes have gradually turned into disappointment. Instead of focusing on democracy or improving daily life, Traoré's government pushed through controversial laws, dissolving the Independent Electoral Commission, and passing an anti-homosexuality law that drew condemnation from around the world. Inside Burkina Faso, many still hail him as a hero resisting foreign powers. But for the Burkinabè community in France, people exposed to broader information and able to compare with European societies, the contrast is clear. To them, Traoré is no longer a symbol of hope, but a leader drifting further away from freedom and democracy. And it was from that disillusionment that the chants of "Step down now" echoed through the streets of Paris. On that day, the streets of Paris, usually filled with the sound of car horns and tourist footsteps, echoed instead with chants, "Traoré, step down now." Hundreds of Burkinabè gathered, waving the red, green, yellow flag of their homeland. Handwritten banners were raised high, traditional African drums thundered through the air, and faces showed anger mixed with deep disappointment. In the crowd, you could see every generation, young students and workers who had come to France to study or build a future, alongside older immigrants who had left Burkina Faso decades ago. Despite differences in age and profession, they all shared one voice, demanding change for Burkina Faso. Some told reporters, "We love our country, but we cannot accept a military government that strips away freedom." Others shared, "Here in France, we have the right to speak out, and we want our voices to be heard back in Ouagadougou." For the diaspora community, the protest was not only about rejecting a single leader, It was also a declaration that even far from home, their hearts and their responsibility to their country remain intact. What makes the protests in Paris so striking is the sharp contrast with the situation back home. In Burkina Faso, many still view Ibrahim Traoré as a courageous young leader. His image in military uniform, fist raised against Western interference, convinces many that he is the new symbol of national pride. Rallies inside the country are often filled with slogans supporting the government, hailing him as a hero fighting against neo-colonialism. But abroad, especially in France, the perspective is entirely different. Burkinabè, living in a democratic environment where freedom of expression is protected, can compare the reality of their homeland with the freedoms they now experience. From that vantage point, it is easier to see the limits and even the regressions brought by the military government. This contrast reveals an important truth. No leader enjoys absolute support. Domestic praise does not necessarily translate into global consensus, and it raises a deeper question. Is the admiration at home the result of genuine belief or the product of propaganda and a tightly controlled political environment? What many people often overlook is the political power of diaspora communities. They may be far from their homeland geographically, but their voices can still carry strong influence, sometimes even beyond national borders. A clear example is the Cuban community in the United States. For decades, Cuban exiles in Florida have exerted powerful political pressure on Washington, helping to shape U.S. policy toward Havana. Similarly, the Iranian diaspora in Europe and America frequently organizes protests against the Tehran regime, keeping Iran's human rights issues in international headlines. The Burkinabè in France are no different. Their protests are not only about expressing frustration, but also about hoping their voices will create international pressure on Traoré's government. They understand that in today's globalized world, a country's international image can be just as important as domestic support. That's why the protest in Paris was more than just a symbolic act. It was a reminder that the diaspora can be a genuine political force, people with the power to influence global opinion and indirectly push for change in their homeland. A crucial question arises. Can the chants in Paris truly reach Ouagadougou? In reality, Burkina Faso's military government can easily dismiss protests abroad. They control domestic media, limit outside information, and frame any opposition as a plot orchestrated by the West. Yet on another level, those voices are far from meaningless. They are carried by international press, amplified through social media, and heard by human rights organizations and Western governments. Images of protests in Paris, the capital of France, Burkina Faso's former colonial power, hold powerful symbolic weight that cannot be ignored. In this way, even if they don't directly shake Traoré's rule, the voices of the diaspora can still help shape international opinion. And that international opinion can circle back, creating diplomatic and economic pressure on Burkina Faso. So every chant of "Step Down Now" on the streets of Paris, however small, has the potential to ripple outward and indirectly impact the homeland thousands of miles away. The story of the Burkinabè community in France is not unique. Africa's history has shown many diaspora groups becoming powerful forces in the struggle for freedom and democracy. Take, for example, the Ethiopian community in the United States. During times of political crisis, they have repeatedly organized protests in Washington, D.C., pressuring Congress and bringing Ethiopia's issues into international headlines. Or the Congolese diaspora in Europe, who frequently march against corruption and violence in Kinshasa. Their voices ring out right in front of the European Union headquarters, creating pressure the Congolese government cannot easily ignore. These examples show that diasporas are not merely people living far from home. They can become bridges between their homeland and the world, drawing international attention that domestic governments struggle to silence. And now, the Burkinabè community in France is walking that same path, turning their voices into part of the larger conversation on democracy and human rights in Africa. From the streets of Ouagadougou to the squares of Paris, two opposing pictures of Burkina Faso's future coexist. On one side is the domestic support for Traoré, whether born of genuine belief, national pride, or the influence of propaganda. On the other side is the dissent of the diaspora, people who see more clearly the limits on freedom and democracy. This shows that Burkina Faso's future is caught between two forces: internal pressure and international pressure. At home, the government must maintain support to survive. But abroad, the protests and voices of the diaspora can push the country toward diplomatic isolation and even the loss of critical foreign aid. History has proven that no government can indefinitely avoid both types of pressure. Sooner or later, either they must change, or change will be forced upon them from outside. For Burkina Faso, the bigger question is not just who will lead, but whether the nation can find a path that balances the desire for national independence with the demands for democracy and human rights in an increasingly interconnected world. The protests of the Burkinabè community in France are not just the internal affairs of a small African nation. They reflect a broader reality. Anywhere in the world, diaspora communities can become powerful voices for freedom and democracy. For an American audience, this is not unfamiliar. We've seen the Cuban community in Florida strongly influence Washington's policies toward Havana, or the Ukrainian diaspora in the U.S., whose lobbying and protests have helped secure military and economic support from the American government. The lesson here is clear. The voices of people, whether inside or outside their homeland, carry power. When voices are restricted or silenced at home, the diaspora can act as a loudspeaker, amplifying the message to the world. That is why the protests in Paris are not just Burkina Faso's story. They are a reminder to all of us. Freedom and democracy cannot be confined within a nation's borders. They are always part of a global conversation. When the chants of "Step Down Now" echoed through the heart of Paris, they were not aimed only at Ibrahim Traoré, nor solely at Burkina Faso. They were also a reminder to the entire world. Wherever freedom is suppressed, voices of resistance will always find a way to rise, whether from within the country or from thousands of miles away. For Burkina Faso, it is a warning that the path of dictatorship and repression will only lead to growing opposition, both at home and abroad. For the rest of the world, it is a lesson that democracy and human rights are never the private struggles of a single nation, but part of humanity's shared fight. And for each of us, watching now from America, Europe, or anywhere else, the question we must ask ourselves is this: if your homeland faced such a moment, would you remain silent, or would you raise your voice? Because in the end, the power to change history often begins with chants that seem small, but have the strength to shake an entire nation.